Everyone, I'm Taylor at Growing with the Griffins, and behind me is the newest addition to the yard that we're working on. Really pleased with how it turned out. It's called a gabion wall. We made it using both materials that we got from the hardware store as well as materials that we had already on hand in the yard. As we went through the assessment process for this yard, there were a few things that we noticed right away. One was this pretty obvious slope in the back, and our client expressed an interest in potentially terracing the slope to kind of even it out and make it more traversable. We at first weren't really sure if we wanted to do that. It seemed like it was going to be a lot of labor and added cost. So we weren't going to do that. We just thought we could level it out a little bit more to make it more easy to walk. Another thing we had to think about was what to do with all of this rock. We have so much of this rock in the yard, and it's not a pleasant rock. It's pretty jagged. It's hard to walk on with bare feet. So we first considered how, can we sell this on Facebook Marketplace or on Craigslist? And we might still do that with some of it. Our second idea was to use it as part of the chicken coop and run design. We wanted to have a foundation, and so we dug a trench, and we actually ended up putting the rock in the trench to sort of use it as a pseudo foundation that the boards will lay on. But that project didn't use up really that much of the rock, so we still had a lot more that we had to be able to use. The next idea we thought of was to actually return to the terracing idea, because in our research we came across gabion walls. And gabion walls are made from fencing and typically large rocks that the fencing holds together the large rocks and it makes a nice retaining wall. We really liked this idea because we already had all the rocks, so it enabled us to use what we had on hand, and the cost of materials for the rest of it, the wire fencing and the rebar stakes, kept the cost of the project under $100. It was pretty nice to be able to both use the rock and solve the slope issue. If you click on the link in the description, you can see a step-by-step process of how to do this project yourself. Here's how we made our gabion wall. We wanted our wall to be 1 foot high, 1 foot deep, and 50 feet long. So we got about 50 feet of 4-foot fencing. Having our wall be only 1 foot tall worked great for our needs, but if you're hoping to build something a little bit bigger, you might want to invest in more wire fencing and perhaps something with a thicker gauge to be able to hold the rocks together. We had already drawn out full plans for the garden, so we knew exactly where we wanted the wall. Cassidy was able to just measure about 7.5 feet from the back fence, and she did this every so often, putting flags in the ground, and then we just ran a piece of string from flag to flag so that we could kind of see how straight the line was, and that showed us where we would dig our trench. As we began to dig the trench, we used an 8-foot 2x4 and a level kind of as we went to figure out if we were staying relatively level. The fencing actually is pretty forgiving, so we were okay adapting to some of the natural curves of the yard. And the fencing, like I said, is pretty forgiving. You can step in it and kind of force it to fit the ground that you're working on. So we just wanted to get the ground relatively level, and that would meet our needs. After we dug the trench, we rolled out all 50 feet of the wire fencing and we folded it in half. From there, we folded half of that in half as well. At this point, we were ready to put the wall in the ground. So we just picked it up and walked it into the trench and placed it in there. We kind of stepped it in. Once we had done that, we just went around and saw if there were any big rocks that were breaking up the flow, and we took those out. And then we used the 2-foot rebar stakes, and we put those about every 4 feet in the wall on the exposed side of the wall, basically limiting the risk of it collapsing down the slope. After that, it just took a few hours to fill it with the rock. If we were to build it again, we would probably get fencing with a little bit smaller spacing so that the rocks could stay in a little bit more. The rocks that we're using are smaller than the rocks that people typically use for gabion walls. And so we wanted to use what we had on hand, what was already here. The rocks just fall through a little bit, but over time we've noticed that it kind of packs in together, and we're hoping that over the winter it'll continue to settle. Then in the spring we can just, once the snow is gone, we can sort of top off the rest. Once the wall was mostly filled with rocks, we bent over the final side of the wall and we tied it together with some leftover kind of scrap fencing. We also placed rubber caps on the sharp ends of the rebar stakes just for safety. The final step was to top it off and then level out the ground that leads up to the gabion wall, and it looks great. Our plan is to grow creeping thyme over and down the gabion wall and other plants like that. So we're really excited to see how this wall kind of evolves and what it will look like next summer. Here's what the wall currently looks like. Well, I really hope you found something helpful in this video. And if you did, would you give the video a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this?